Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, October the 2nd, 2025, and today we are balancing the good and the bad in the garden, decompacting clay without making it worse, and we hear about what it's like to go from good soil to, well, not great soil. So let's do it. All right, so that awesome cover of the theme song came to us from Max Brabner, and it in fact goes on a little longer, and it's awesome, and it has lyrics, and we will play that a little later in the show, so shouts to Max for that, and to everyone who has sent us a cover of the theme song. We really appreciate it, and you are welcome to keep sending those. You can send those or your 20-second farm video clips to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Thursday already, and welcome to October. I hope your Octobers have started off productively or restfully or whatever you had hoped for them so far. 2 days in, probably didn't have a lot of hopes, but I don't want to rule it out. I have been slowly getting the garlic in myself. That's, in fact, what I worked on yesterday after the live, which shouts to everyone who joined that. Good times as always. I'll continue to do one of those a month. I think that's pretty fun. I have 2 more garden beds to get the garlic into today, and that job should be donezo. Although I still have to find a place for the elephant garlic, but otherwise the garlic will be done. Then it's on to digging the sweet potatoes, which I frankly can't wait for. I want to get those out. I want to get them curing. I want to eat them, like all of them. And then I want to get that cover crop in because it's just about that time. I know we just entered October, but don't forget that next month, that would be November, I will be at the Carolina Farm Stewardship Conference in South Carolina. Love to see you all there. Not sure how that will affect this show, but I think I will return with some fodder for you. So a small disruption for a long-term game, hopefully. That seems like a fair, fun trade. Also, next week, I will be at the Kentucky Composting Conference, which should be a super fun time. Link to both of those events will be in the show notes. All right, as is our custom on Thursdays, we like to catch up a bit on the Patreon questions. Patreon members, I have a new thread up for October, so get your questions in over there, and we will spend the winter tackling those. So as many questions as you need and want to get in is good by me. Today's first Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Martin Komaru, who writes, quote, "One of the great things I learned from you was to be a little less dogmatic, recognizing that sometimes, quote unquote, bad solutions are actually the best solution if applied very targeted and very rarely. A good example being that tilling your site a singular time, if the soil is compacted, and after that making sure it never gets compacted again, can lead to better long-term outcomes than refusing to till at all. I was wondering if you ever struggle with being okay with temporary costs of the best bad solution sometimes. As an example, a large part of my site is a collection of trees installed as a privacy screen. I want to replace them with a hand-selected list of species. For a shelter belt type of thing, the solution should be better in all ways, more wind protection and vastly more insect and bird food and habitat. However, to do this requires tearing up all the trees, roots, and all. So if I want my site to be 10 out of 10 for biodiversity, I basically have to bulldoze it first, do what I need to do, and then let it recover. The rest of my site is production, so bridging the gap, so to speak, is not possible. And I guess I just feel a bit guilty about destroying all that habitat, even if it's for a good cause. Do you have any thoughts?" End quote. All right, this is a great question, and we've talked a little bit about these ideas in the past, but I think in some ways, it gets to the heart of what it means to be a steward of the soil. You are always sort of making complicated and sometimes very diametric calculations, balancing harm and help to improve soil and make it work for you. That might be bringing equipment in, for instance, to bulldoze for a pond. The equipment will cause some compaction, but the pond will bring in life. Or maybe it's more continuous stuff like using a tractor with fossil fuels to build soil on large acreage or whatever it may be. Or maybe it's getting rid of, like invasive or non-native plants like you're talking about, even if they are technically habitat, which obviously don't do that in the spring when birds are hatching out and fledglings are being cute and fluffy. But this calculus is, of course, part of all life and a huge part of human history. The mighty beaver, for instance, a creature I've long been fascinated with, affects its environment more than any other creature other than humans, causing flooding, disrupting streams, yet they also bring more life and abundance to the area they affect, more so than any other creatures, definitely including humans. In fact, it's almost built into life that creatures are trying to benefit themselves, altering their environments to some extent in the process. But the difference between most other life and ourselves is that we are, at least in this era of humanity, the only ones who provide very little for the life around us. We, as a culture, are masterful at extraction, not at reciprocation. An earthworm consumes microbes, but it poops the manure out, which feeds plants, which feeds more microbes. Humans poison our manure with what we eat and flush it off to a factory to be processed. Trees drop their leaves on the ground, which perhaps leaves birds more exposed to predators, so the birds fly south while those leaves become food and habitat for tiny creatures that become food and habitat for the birds when they return, and nutrition for the trees the following year. Humans, for their part, spray pests with herbicides that poison both what they eat, the humans, and the soil the food is grown in. For millennia, humans managed the land in a way that actually replenished it, but how we managed to, or even why we managed to step outside of that role of stewardship in the land is difficult to understand, and it's frustrating to think about. This is how humans often get analogized to parasites, a creature who, takes and takes and then looks for a new host. Hi, Mars. But there's always some amount of take with the give in nature, and it doesn't always have to be a negative thing to cause small amount of harm if the end result is additional good. In fact, that's kind of just life, or how it should be. With a good plan and the right intentions, that small amount of harm can prove great dividends to the ecology. Unlike most other life, humans have to be conscious and intentional with these things. Otherwise, we are indeed going to consume our host, which would be the Earth. Anyway, thoughts on that? Should I do a whole segment on beavers and their teeth that literally contain iron? I probably will one day anyway. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk breaking up clay without making it worse. BRB. I really want to do like a play on words of like breaking up clay without cracking up. It just doesn't quite work, but it could.
Just got good thing on my heart, Kentucky where the bluegrass grow. Hey, mama, just see what you got going. Tell us like is such a good thing going.
Brian here, Snowflake Farm. Here's a lesson learned. This plastic netting for trellis, it's only good for one use. It's going to have to go in the landfill after that. You can't even compost the crop residue. It's just entangled in it. So we won't be using that again.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Do you get $2 worth of value per month for this show? $5? You can show that support over at Patreon. And as a bonus, although I try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, I will always get to your Patreon question. So that's a fun little treat there, like a personal consultant live on air. Anyway, today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Andy Novak at Mother Farm, who writes, quote, "Hey, Jesse, we're looking to break new ground soon, and I have a question on subsoiling. I read in your book that your ideal bed establishment protocol would involve subsoiling, but I also read in your book that subsoiling can also create compaction if done when too wet. For context, we have heavy clay soil and are in a wet and cool stretch right now, including standing water in a lot of areas. Our ideal plan was to subsoil, apply compost and amendments, till that in, and then cover crop the plot. Would you forego the subsoiling in this wet stretch? We are dealing with drainage issues in our other garden plots, and I thought subsoiling would be a great tool to mitigate that in our future plots, but don't want to do more damage by pushing it in a wet year. Thanks," end quote. All right, thanks to you, Andy. And a somewhat poignant question here to follow the last one. Sometimes to get soil humming and to the point that you don't have to till it regularly or till it really at all, it may take a little work on that soil in the beginning. That said, as I told Andy when this question first came in, because Andy put the little alarm bell, I would probably forego the subsoiling in this case if you absolutely have to break into it while it's wet. And then just assume that you will have to broad fork for a couple years after that. The compaction caused by working it too wet will create more work for you for many years to come at a very deep level, which is spectacularly difficult to manage. The alternative would be just to wait until the conditions are better to do any soil work and then do the soil work as you described with the amendments. Again, beyond the subsoiling, which for those of you who don't know, it's basically like a long shank that sort of just breaks up the soil. You just drag it through the soil and it breaks it up deep underground without turning it over. But beyond the subsoiling, especially if tilling is the next step, as I write in the book, you don't want to create compaction slicks that hold water. If you want to know what that looks like, especially for something like a tiller, just rub some wet clay in between your fingers and you can see how easy it is to make, pottery. Then just imagine that with a tilling machine or a subsoiler drug through at the wrong time. It creates this really deep slick that basically turns to pottery and is really hard for water and roots and those sorts of things to penetrate. That all leads to like anaerobic pockets, water that just kind of sits there, and that can lead to, nothing good. So pathogens and low oxygen environments and ultimately plant death. I would also definitely address any drainage issues before starting the garden if possible. That is really hard to fix while the garden is up and running. I had a mentor say that it's hard to work on a moving train. Once the soil is moving, once the soil is planted and you're growing stuff, it's really hard to do these like baseline foundational things. The subsoiling could help on the drainage front, but it could also make the problem worse. Again, especially if it's done at the wrong time, or even if it's done well, it's possible it'll have no real effect on the drainage because maybe it's a low spot or just, generally a wet spot at certain times of the year. I have a few areas like that where it doesn't matter how much good soil work we do. There is a seep there in the spring and it will just be wet. It's just going to be wet. If you need that area early or when it's very wet, you may need to investigate the drainage a little more and where the water is coming from, or just, not use that spot in the early spring. We will actually touch a bit on the importance of really getting the garden set up in the next segment and taking your time because difficult soils can remain difficult for a very long time. So if you can be patient in getting the garden set up, it will really show in your production and sanity over the long haul. Anyway, let me know your all's thoughts or questions. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, a mini case study on soil health. Be right back.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, our third and final Patreon question of the day is not really a question so much, but it does bring up an interesting topic, and it comes to us from Thomas Van Wart, who writes, quote, "Hey, Jesse, less of a question, more of a testimony. We recently moved to central Oklahoma, zone 3 through 9, depending on the day, they say, and couldn't express more about the importance of soil health. We had a large 2,000 square foot raised bed garden in central New Jersey for 4 years over the pandemic. In that area, we were able to find significant quantities of very good quality soil. We had options from mushroom compost to standard compost. Even the topsoil blends were of much better quality than they are here in Oklahoma. Without any pest pressure nor disease pressure, I was able to grow carrots and plant everything with just my hand. No need for a shovel. Fast forward to this year in Oklahoma with the dense clay sand soil, wild temperature swings, intense heat, and fast cold, we struggled a lot more. The compost options are fewer, and the topsoil quality I received that was supposed to be quote-unquote garden ready was terrible. This year I had 3 pests at all times attacking the tomatoes and disease everywhere. The difference in soil, health, and quality between our 2 gardens is significant. Can't express enough how grateful I am to know and experience the value of great soil. Healthy soil and the difference that makes in your garden enjoyment and production. Thank you for covering random questions and very specific issues in your podcast. I'm in the process of binging everything over the last year and have loved the YouTube videos as well. Thanks again." End quote. All right. Thank you, Thomas. And I know this sort of conundrum or this sort of reality all too well. I have farmed good soils and difficult soils and several in-betweeners. Sometimes you can do everything right and still struggle because of the climate, the access to water, the access to good compost, the previous land use. A lot of this stuff is just flat out of your control, at least in the beginning. And I wanted to share this because as we've talked about, a couple times in the first year of this show, not everyone's, garden journey is going to be the same. Sometimes the circumstances are just in one person's favor over another, but no matter the soil, the principles are largely the same to get that soil humming. But it may take longer in some situations than others. After 4 seasons on this new farm, the compacted clay that we have is getting better, but it's still not where my soil was on my last farm after just a couple of seasons. It will just, take longer to get there here. Yeah, that makes sense. Than it did on the other farm. Maybe next week I will do a whole show on the conservation ag principles and how to think about each one, because I think it is important to, understand there are things that run all soils the same way, but then there are also different ways to manage those based on your context, which will make sense next week when I do that show. But just keep your heads up and don't compare yourselves to anyone else. You may be doing exactly the right thing, only they have better soil to work from to start with better ingredients. That would be like compost or whatever nearby to add. There is no magic bullet. Farming and gardening is just dynamic and situational. And sometimes, unfortunately, your job is going to be a lot harder than someone else's. Or in Thomas's, and frankly, my case, sometimes one farm is just going to be harder than another, even just a few miles away. I mean, I know Oklahoma and New Jersey are quite a stretch, but for us, we moved 15 minutes away and these 2 farms could not be more different. Soils are complicated like that. The nice thing is when the garden doesn't start out perfect is when you really get to see how much it improves over time. Anyway, don't get discouraged. Enjoy the journey. Moreover, and this one goes to everyone, have a great rest of your Thursday. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear while I itch my hand. Pick up a hat like this one or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook at no-tillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to Long Shot Farm. Shouts to Long Shot. And saved here. The story, wouldn't have continued without Long Shot. So huge shouts to that. All right, so as you will remember, our writer friend, Dennis, has begun work at a local tech company, and the job is basically just to write stories, both simple and intricate, and just see how well the sort of box interprets the story, and it sort of gives you back like a picture, like a 3D picture of it. And the idea being that families could buy these things and then create their own stories or watch other people's stories, and it could be some sort of interactive form of social media, but also like entertainment, like replacing Netflix and all these things. And Dennis is not particularly tech savvy, but he loves this job. It pays fairly well. It's creative and challenging, and his work seems valued. The director really wants to know what he thinks, and his mother calls again while he's working on his first full day. But he ignores it and he just plans to go visit her after, the workday is done, because he really likes this job and he wants to keep it. And she has this plumbing issue. Shouldn't take him very long to fix it. But anyway, in the meantime, he just, plugs away. He tries some sad stories like this mother and daughter in a wartime, trying to have a garden so they can feed themselves. And then there's another one. There's these weird stories about farmers inheriting a land. And that one was odd anyway. And then there was a story about a mysterious snowfall that happens in this one town in Tennessee. And every time the box just sort of turns to life and creates something sort of beautiful with some quirks that he notes, for the director. But it's a lot of fun. It's really interesting to see how all these different stories are interpreted. Then, as the day winds down, he gets ready to go visit his mother out at the old farmhouse, and that is for tomorrow on What Killed the Video Star. That one actually kind of works. All right, way to go, Dennis. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, for Feedback Friday. So get your feedback in. Bye.